Okay, let's get started. Thank you for joining us today. It's Wednesday, July 27th, 2022. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are, maybe even good evening. First things first, this session is being provided in English and French. I will be speaking in English, but if you prefer to hear this in French, please click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your Zoom window. It looks like a circle with stripes in it. Once you click that, then select either English or French. This will ensure that for those who prefer to listen to French, the audio will function correctly. And hello, my name is Nathan Christie. I work for the Alzheimer Society of Canada, and this is Dementia Talks Canada, a new webinar series that centers the conversation on Alzheimer's disease and other dementias with people who have their own unique stories, tips, and insights. Today, you'll hear from a person living independently with Alzheimer's disease, a caregiver and longtime advocate, and a researcher talk about the intersection of dementia and technology. Personally, I'm very excited to hear and learn from these folks and what they can share on this particular topic. I also want to acknowledge that today's session is being recorded. Rest assured, only the video and audio of the speakers and myself, today's moderator, will be captured during the recording. And for the most part, this will be a panel discussion between our three speakers, but there will be a Q&A session at the end to address any questions and comments you may want to ask. As well, I also want to note that there will be some poll questions. I think one just popped up right now that will pop up at certain points throughout the talk. We encourage you to answer these questions when they appear. But before we begin, I would first like to acknowledge that the Alzheimer Society of Canada acknowledges that our offices here in Toronto are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties signed with multiple Mississauga and Chippewa bands. Okay, so just to give a bit more background about Dementia Talks Canada and what this webinar series is, if this is your first time here, well, we've got a lot in store for you. This series is presented by the Alzheimer Society of Canada in partnership with Brain Canada. When you watch a Dementia Talks Canada episode like today, you will hear about the most up-to-date and relevant dementia research and topics from people who are affected by dementia in Canada in ways that are practical and can be applied to your everyday life. The Alzheimer Society is Canada's leading nationwide health charity for people living with Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. Active in communities across Canada, the Society provides information, programs, and services to people living with a diagnosis and their caregivers or care partners. The Alzheimer Society Research Program is Canada's leading funder of research into better understanding the causes of dementia, improving treatment and care, and toward finding cures. And Brain Canada plays a unique and valuable role as a national convener of the community of those who support and advance brain research. A greater understanding of how the brain works will contribute to the prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and cure of disorders of the brain, thereby improving the health outcomes of Canadians across the country. Brain Canada's main areas of focus are fundraising, granting, and strengthening the brain research community. Okay. So today's discussion is the third event of the Dementia Talks Canada series. Each month, Dementia Talks Canada will feature a conversation on one topic related to dementia involving people who have direct firsthand experience. In our first two episodes, we examined the unique experience of people living with young onset dementia, that is, people who have been diagnosed with dementia before the age of 65, as well as the challenges faced by people living with dementia and caregivers who are also two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, or other gender identities and sexual orientations. Both were amazing, informative discussions involving people with direct experience. If you would like to see those Dementia Talks and register for upcoming ones, I really encourage you to visit and bookmark our webpage at alzheimer.ca/talks. We should have a link appearing in the chat box shortly. And today, for our third talk, Dementia and Tech in Today's Digital World. What's helping and what's next? We have three individuals, lovely folks, who possess unique perspectives and knowledge regarding this particular topic. This Dementia Talk features Roger Marple, an advocate and person living with young onset Alzheimer's disease, Ron Boleno, an advocate and caregiver for his father who lived with Alzheimer's, and Amel Yadidin, occupational therapist, and PhD candidate studying technological solutions that can help older adults with cognitive impairments live independently at home. So, before we get to our questions, let's learn a little bit more about our speakers, starting with Roger. So Roger Marple, lives in Medicine Hat, Alberta. He's coming up from us today, actually in British Columbia. So good morning, Roger. He's good morning. He's the proud father and grandfather of 3 grown children and 1 grandson. He's an avid sports enthusiast.
3 grandsons.
I'm sorry. 3 grandsons.
Yeah, it's had a couple more born there. I'll have to update that.
Well, congrats to that. So you're an avid sports enthusiast. You enjoy playing tennis and golf. You love to travel. And you also know your way around the kitchen with a real appetite for baking. You worked for Alberta Health Services and supply management in the South Zone for over 23 years. And in his own words, Roger is living well with young onset Alzheimer's disease. He also serves on the board of directors of the Alzheimer Society of Alberta and Northwest Territories and is active in supporting dementia research in Canada. Roger also serves on the Alzheimer Society of Canada's advisory group of people with lived experience of dementia, helping raise awareness of the needs of people living with dementia, including the specific needs of people living with young onset dementia. He is proud of his work as an advisory group member, including leading as the group's steering committee and participating in the development of the first ever Canadian Charter of Rights for people with dementia. He also provided direct input into the Society's Memory Tips and Tricks resource, which helps people living independently with dementia through helpful routines and reminders that's been recommended by Roger based on his own day-to-day living. And you can actually see these resources at alzheimer.ca/charter and alzheimer.ca/memory-tips, respectively. You should see those links pop up in the chat box to these resources shortly. Since his diagnosis in December 2015, Roger has made it his mission to dispel myths about Alzheimer's disease and the stigma associated with dementia. He's a firm believer that you can live well with dementia, regardless of the challenges, and is passionate about sharing his message of hope. Welcome, Roger. We're happy to have you aboard.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ron Boleno. Ron is an experienced family caregiver to his late father, who lived well with Alzheimer's for over 10 years, while partnering with his senior mother during their journey. He is an advocate in the dementia and aging communities with expertise in technology, aging in place, caregiving, and patient engagement. Ron is the co-chair for Age Well NCE's Older Adults and Caregiver Advisory Committee, which is Canada's Aging and Technology Network, where he received their Honorary Fellows Award for 2020. He is an advisor and presenter for groups such as the Alzheimer and Dementia Societies, locally and internationally, the Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation at Baycrest, SE Health, and as a coach with Healthcare Excellence Canada. He's a guest lecturer for universities and colleges in programs such as nursing, social work, occupational therapy, engineering, and aging. He's also a mentor in residence representing the caregiver and patient voice with University of Toronto's Faculty of Medicine's Translational Research Program. And further in his past, Ron has a background in computer sciences, space and communication sciences, marine aquaculture, life coaching, culinary arts. Yeah, the shirt there, right there, just signifies it, right? He was the founder and executive director of a youth career and employment center that served over 30,000 young people, immigrants, and career changers in the Toronto area during its operation. We are very lucky to have you aboard today, Ron. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Nathan.
And last, our final speaker today is Amel Yadadin. Amel is a PhD candidate in rehabilitation sciences at the Université de Montréal. She is also a certified occupational therapist. Since 2018, she pursues a career in research to develop innovative solutions for older adults with cognitive impairments to age in place. Her project focuses on the development of an innovative technological solution to help older adults with cognitive impairments, like dementia, to stay at home, as well as to identify new ways to deploy access to these technologies for this population. Another objective of her PhD focuses on documenting different functional profiles during instrumental activities of daily living, performances of older adults from the dementia continuum to identify critical errors that affect safety. During her curriculum, Amel was involved in several advisory committees. She was the Quebec regional representative on the student committee and the knowledge translation subcommittee of the Age Well National Network, a pan-Canadian center of excellence dedicated to research and technologies related to aging. and she aims to become an engaged scientist in the field of age tech to lead innovative projects that catalyze social change and promote the social inclusion of older adults. So wow, all three people today, we're so lucky to have you for this talk. A huge thanks to all three of you for joining us today and lending us your time and insights. So let's get started. I'm sure you've heard enough from me. You want to hear from all three of these people right here. So what is happening in the dementia and technology space? In the 116 years since Dr. Alois Alzheimer's first described symptoms of Alzheimer's disease to the scientific audience, so much has changed in the dementia space, including great shifts in the range of technologies, devices, and tools used by people living with dementia and their caregivers. This is especially so in recent years, where we've seen an explosion of apps around dementia and brain health. Some of these apps are aimed at people living with dementia, others at caregivers, and others still toward healthcare workers. Comparing today to even, let's say, a decade ago, many standard smartphone features, social media tools, and messaging platforms are offering more ways for people living with dementia and caregivers alike to access information, find support, and get connected to others sharing their same experiences. So how exactly is technology being used in the dementia space right now, helping people living with dementia, caregivers, healthcare providers, and more? That's what we're going to talk about today. Let's investigate that right now for our speakers. So with our first question, and this is a question for everyone. Fair warning, it's going to sound like a simple question, but it may be a bit difficult to answer, so I'm sorry in advance. But when I say technology, that word can mean so many different things to so many different people. Just to narrow the context for this discussion, when I say technology, what do you picture in your mind? How do you interpret technology in this context with dementia? Maybe either for providing care for yourself or for someone else. Ron, let's go to you first. I'd like to hear your thoughts.
So thanks, Nathan, and greetings to everyone, and thanks for your time to join us today. So that word technology can scare some people, or actually, for some people like myself, I quite embrace technology. But in the space of dementia, it's still quite new, but it is growing. And I'm going to try, from my perspective, simplify it. And I'm sure Roger and Amel have, your technology adopters as well. So you have three people that love technology on this group. So we might be a little biased here, but I'm going to try and simplify it with props. Okay, I like to bring in some props. And one of the props I like to sometimes bring in is this tool bag. So pretty much for me, technology, I like to replace the word with tool. So this is just a tool bag here, okay? And those tools could be a hammer, they could be a screwdriver, I could have, a measuring tape, but they all serve a purpose. And for me, we have to be careful on the word technology again. I like to replace it with the word tools. And these are tools to simply support us to move forward in our lives when it comes to dementia, or just in life in general. So for example, to me, technology, if I want to put, let's say, this photo of Dad Ray, okay, up on the wall, okay, I need tools, okay? And if I don't have the proper tool, if I have a pen, if I have a letter opener, I'm just grabbing stuff around here, I don't think I'll be able to accomplish that. So that's why I kind of need the basics, a hammer and a nail, okay? This is the low-tech technology, but it is still technology, okay? So that's an example of what I talk about when it comes to, technology in general. I'm sure we're going to go into it, Nathan, some examples later. Many people think of smartphone devices. I know you led with that, apps and all that. They're all great, that's part of it, but there's way more than just that. And that's what I want us to kind of eventually talk about. Again, just in our homes very quickly here, activities of daily living, okay? So the challenges of just eating, bathing, whatever that is. We already have technology there. Most of us have a toilet, but that's not around the world, but that's a technology. Okay, just imagine if you didn't have that technology. So that's kind of the technology I'm interested in, the ones that are actually part of your life that becomes natural. And especially with dementia, last thing I'm going to say is we need to not focus just on the technology first. We need to understand the challenge. Okay, so what is it specific to dementia, the challenges in the dementia space, where we can benefit from a technology, okay, either to increase the chances of success with that technology. Could be a GPS device, okay, just throwing some of these out, to keep my dad safe, and reduce those failures. So if my dad does get lost, for example, that's a big one. And then, you know, Roger, I'm sure you can talk about that. That is something that I look at. So remember, the challenges is a big deal when it comes to technology. So that's kind of a warm up.
That's perfect, Ron. And you do talk about a couple things that we're going to bring up later in this discussion. But let's go to Roger next. So Roger, question to you. When I say technology, what do you hear as a person living independently with dementia?
I view technology kind of what Ron laid out. I use a combination. Well, I got to get something off my chest right away. The general public, there's 250 people a day, according to Stats Canada, being diagnosed with some form of dementia in Canada. And that's from Stats Canada. So my point is that there is 1,000 faces to dementia. We need to see all the faces. And there may be people listening today say, well, my mother can't do that. And that's okay, right? It depends where we're at in the journey. And I find as time goes on, the challenges get more pronounced, and I lean on technology more and more and more. I use a combination of, like, are we going to be talking about how to use the applications in more detail later? Okay, I won't dive in there then. But yeah, that's right. I find that the combination between different things like Google Home, Life 360, putting a tile in your wallet to, if you leave your wallet somewhere, that tile will tell me where I left my wallet. Like, there's all sorts of technology out there that assist me, that is diehard. I use every day or close to it. Google Home is my #1 favorite, you know, that kind of thing. But I also tie it into low tech. I have a whiteboard on the door of my exit in the condo I live in. I make notes on that, right? I read it every day. Remember your phone. Remember your hearing aids, right? Remember this, remember that. Don't walk out the door without these items, right? Did you take your meds, right? That kind of thing. So there's a low tech option, right? So it's a combination. And I could talk about memory techniques, but maybe not for this question.
Okay, but that's a really good summary, Roger. And we'll definitely ask you in a bit about those specific tech pieces of technology to use, whether it's high tech or low tech. Mm-hmm. And then over to Amel from the researcher side of things. And in your context of your own research, when you hear technology, what do you think of?
Yes, thank you, Nathan. When we talk about technology, and what I think is really interesting with what Ron and Roger said is that technology is a tool. It's the application of scientific knowledge to the purpose of human life and human activities, and not the opposite. So when we talk about technology, we need to understand the challenges that the people face. And in the dementia context, as Roger said, there are a lot of profiles, and understanding all the profiles and all the needs of these people is really important to adapt the technology to the needs of these people, and not the opposite. It's not the people that need to adapt to the technology. It's the technology that needs to adapt to the people. It's a tool. So that's what I had to add.
Thanks so much for all three of you. And I think that there is that commonality there, that technology is a tool, but just like any other tool, it can be misused or used better or used in certain ways. And as we're about to hear, there are certain ways you can use that tool that can help people living with dementia and caregivers. So I want to go to Roger now. As a person living with dementia who also lives independently at home, you found a lot of different ways actually to use technology to help your day-to-day life. You just mentioned a few of them, including Google Home, the tile to include in your wallet, using apps to set your routines and your reminders. We're even on this Zoom call right now That's using technology to communicate with other people and reach a wide audience. So, Roger, how about you just take a few minutes to tell us a bit more about how you use technology to live well with dementia? What tips, technologies, or tools do you find helpful that you want people on this call to know?
Well, it's one thing for me to say use Google Home, right? It's, I say, hey, everybody, use Google Home. It's fantastic. But if you can't visualize in your mind on how to actually use it, what the tips and tricks are, odds are you're not going to go to Costco and buy a Google Home, right? So let me point out a couple real cool things. I could talk this whole thing just on Google Home. I swear to God, I use it that much. But, let me give you an example, which is user-friendly for people with dementia. If I were to ask Google Home, and I'm sure Alexa works the same way, if I were to ask for a reminder, what happens is, I have it memorized, it'll go, what's your reminder? Like, what do you want to be reminded about? And then I say, doctor's appointment with Dr. So-and-so. Then it'll ask me, what day do you want that on? I could either say next Tuesday or put in a date. It's so intelligent, it'll recognize that. And then the last thing it'll ask you, what time do you want the reminder? So basically it's bulletproof, right? It's bulletproof. I can't see how you could screw up using it, right? And then at the appropriate time, you get that reminder right when you need it, right? And I use it for everything. Like I struggle with spelling. I can't remember how to spell a lot of words. My Achilles heel is my memory. That's my Achilles heel. So I focus on memory. But I'll say, how do you spell anti-establishmentarianism, right? And it'll tell me, right? So that's a tool I constantly use. What's the phone number for Home Depot, right? So there's so many things. If you were to explore Google and how user-friendly it just is wonderful. Technology like Life 360, I've been lost more times than I care to remember, right? Where I might be disorientated in a familiar setting. A lot of people have heard of that with dementia. So Ron, he said, hey, you download Life 360. And it's a simple GPS app that works incredibly well. And it's free. I've been using it for years. And that cuts back on, safety issues, right? Little things like tiles, those tiles where you can put a tile maybe in a suitcase or in a wallet. And if you leave your wallet on the counter, you can pull it up on the phone and go back to where you left your wallet. Bulletproof, right? Bulletproof, technology like that. And there's just so many more. But at the end of the day, it's got to work for you. It's,
Absolutely.
I've had apps and suggestions, and I said that, it's just not going to happen. Doesn't work for me. So you have to cherry pick what's important for you. But I really encourage you to drill down, explore, and find what works for you and take advantage of it.
Thank you, Roger. That was a great answer. Find what works for you and explore that. It's very important to have something that's easy to use and just something you can keep using every day from what it sounds like.
Yeah.
So I want to ask that same question then, what tools, techniques you use to support yourself, but now from the context of a caregiver, so a person that's caring for a person living with dementia. So let's go to Ron. What are some interesting ways of using technologies that caregivers can do to support people living with dementia? Any specific tips, techniques, tools you use and recommend to other family caregivers who may be watching right now?
Yeah. So just like what Roger said, the challenging part is I could just give you all the different products and solutions. that are out there. But if it doesn't apply to your caregiving needs, specifically for the caregiver, I consider myself a caregiver. Some call themselves a care partner, whatever label you use, that's fine. You pick whatever label it is. I always look at myself as the son caring for dad, and how do I keep dad safe? So that was one of the ones that we dealt with. I come back to the challenges. It's about safety. It's also more than just, many times that people think from the caregiving perspective, you lead with safety, but you can also remember about respite for yourself. So what are the tools that can support you with respite? Let's say social inclusion, taking care of social isolation. How can you get more caregivers remotely supporting you? Quality of life, all those things. So I'm just gonna throw a few stuff out here. So when my dad was still around, one of the challenges was him going missing or him going out. So you lead with a challenge, him possibly leaving the house in the middle of the night, when we call it the silent exit. Okay, so the door quietly opens and he leaves, and my mom would be stressed out the whole time, not being able to sleep. So for that, we would have a simple door chime that would just go ding dong when the door opens, let's say. Back then, this was a while ago, but we used cameras and sensors. Okay, now I'm sure we can go into the challenges later of the conversations of the scary parts of technology, privacy, ethics. We'll get into that, I think, with Amel as well. But some of those, of course, I mentioned GPS devices, went through 3 or 4 of them, let's say, different types of tools. And sometimes, the trick is not just someone giving you, get this product, okay, but to say, what does that specific product do for you? I'm going to throw out, let's say, robotic cats, okay, that could give respite, okay, to a caregiver, okay. I would say adaptive, going low tech. So we're talking about adaptive clothing. So slip-on shoes, stuff with Velcro, things like that, that we can have there. So there's a fair bit of tools out there, but it is one where, just to entertain you, Roger, so people understand. So I do have my Google Home, I do have Amazon, okay, controlling the light, okay, remotely for my dad, okay. So I would say, hey, Google, make globe lamp red. Okay, so I think you guys can see that.
Sorry,
red.
I didn't understand.
Oh, so I think that's Amazon not happy listening. And Google got
think
it.
you set my Google off.
Oh, that was you, Roger. Okay, so that was me.
Yeah.
So, but
Sorry.
that's an example where you can even control the environment remotely. I can control music, with my dad's, during, let's say, the sundowning period for some people where it gets challenging, and I want my dad to relax. I can control the lighting. I could play the Frank Sinatra music that he wants remotely. I could have other caregivers caregiving remotely, doing some video conferencing. So those are just some examples to get you going, to think about. Yeah, there's a whole bunch, but it's what you're solving for and asking around and I always say one last tip here, Nathan, I would always tell people, do not pick the first technology that you're suggested or that someone throws to you, even if I give it to you. I would say, find 3 choices. Always find, what are the 3 choices that I can come up with or that someone can educate me? And then you start calculating which is the ones that make sense, or do I combine that with something else? Okay. So some people say, well, it's not just a door chime with my dad leaving, but I also had the neighbors involved. So technology, high tech, low tech, your neighbors, the community, that's something that's quite important that I'll suggest. Even though we're talking about technology, you need to combine it with all the other solutions that you can come up with.
Thanks, Ron. Very good answer, and actually a very good example of like how technology is activated right away when you talked about that. We set off Roger's Amazon or Google Home Echo right there, I think. Now I want to go to Mel, the researcher on this panel. So we just heard from a person living with dementia and a caregiver about their perspectives on using technology to better their quality of lives. But as we've mentioned, Amel, you're currently researching on how innovative technologies can help older adults with cognitive impairments, such as people living with dementia, to age in place. So as well, you're also looking to improve access so that more people can use these supportive technologies. So Amel, can you tell us a little bit more about your research, the special considerations for people with cognitive impairments, the ethics involved, as well as where the future of this research is heading? I know that's a very expansive, but yeah, let's hear from you.
Thank you, Nathan. As you said, it's a very, very large field of research, but I'm gonna try to give a little overview. Before addressing my own research, I'm gonna talk about several points of and elements of current Hdec research. So, as Ron and Roger said, there are several tons of technologies on the market that exist, and a lot also that are available to help people to age in place at home. But as Roger said, and I really like this sentence, is what is easy and what can be used for you. Do this technology works? This is the main question we ask ourselves in research, and there are several limits in the actual research field about that. But if we see like all the reviews and the evidence that is available, they all come to a very similar conclusion, is that there is currently very little solid data, because partly of the poor quality of the studies that are available to document the effectiveness of these technologies. So this is mainly because the majority of them are more about conceptualization or prototype stage. So it's very difficult for us to say what technologies are the most effective for what. Also, their usability is rated very low for now. Usability is the effectiveness, the efficiency, and also the satisfaction of the person using the technology. And also, if we see the current studies, more than 60% of them do not include people with dementia. So this is a very big limit, because if we want to know if a technology works for them, I think they are the main users. They should be the main people we include in the studies. Also, the acceptability is not well documented yet, especially in real environment settings. And if we see the area of smart and intelligent technologies for older adults, only 7% are available on the market right now. So this is very low if we want to provide evidence-based solutions for people with dementia. So my research will address the current limitations of the literature in order to deploy an effective, useful solution for older adults in their environments. Our lab, we have developed a system named Cook, a cognitive orthosis for cooking, for people with severe cognitive impairments, including those that lives with dementia. It's a system that consists of 3 modules. So one is a tablet that is connected to a stove with sensors around that provides cognitive support to the person to be able to do the task of cooking. So, for example, step-by-step instructions. The second model is an ambient safety system based on sensors that detects the activity of the person, and, for example, if the person detects risky situations. For example, if the person leaves the kitchen without turning off the stove, the system is able to detect it and turn off the stove. And finally, the system includes also a dashboard for caregivers that can monitor the activity of the person and see if there's something that is unusual going around. So my research specifically focused on adapting this smart assistant in the kitchen by documenting the needs of the person. As I said earlier, the people with dementia need to be included in the studies. So my first step is to document their needs by observing them in their daily lives in the kitchen, for example, and documenting what are the main challenges they face. The second part of my research is to evaluate and test the usability of this assistant, and finally to implement it in a residence where people live with dementia or not, to document in long-term setting what is the challenges they face by using it in a real world setting environment. So basically this is my research, but I can tell more and more, but we have limited time for that.
Yeah, I wish we could take an hour for each of you just to talk about all the information you guys have, which is so much good stuff there. But Amel, thank you for explaining that. And I really particularly liked when you mentioned about the inclusion of people with lived experience in your research. I think that's a very important thing that often goes unheard of or underspoken. The fact that you include that experience directly in your research, I think makes such a huge difference. And also I want to hear from Roger and Ron, that after listening to what Amel's talked about, her research, was there anything that stood out to you? You can also feel free to talk about dementia research focused on assistive technologies in general, but if there's anything that Amel said that thought, oh, that's interesting, I'd like to hear your thoughts.
You can go for it, Roger.
I'm a huge research advocate. I feel in Canada, we're woefully underfunded, and I have advocated for better funding for years via our government or anyone who will listen to me towards that. So I'm a big fan of research. What was the question again? Repeat it.
What do you think of Amel's research? Anything that stood out to you?
Oh, yes. So the point I wanted to make is, like, organizations like AgeWell, they won't even fund your research if you don't have that lived experience. That's a prerequisite. So you could put together the best proposal for the best research. If you don't have lived experience in your game plan, sorry, we're not funding you. And I think all research organizations, if it is applicable, especially for quality of life research, you know, maybe not biomedical, but quality of life research, I think that should be a prerequisite. If you're designing a website, you really need that input, because if everyone gets hung up in the same spot, in the same rec or application, that has to be adjusted to work for me, not me for it, as she mentioned, you know. The other thing that's I find to be a bit of a black hole, and what I mean is there's terrific, like I'm listening to that stove app. Well, how cool is that? You know, that's pretty cool. I like it. I like the component where it will tell me to shut off the stove or the barbecue, right? Right now I use Google Home for that, right? You know, I'll give me a reminder in 10 minutes. I should be done cooking whatever I'm done. And it'll say, Roger, did you turn off the stove? So I do use other technology, but it'd be cool if the app came up, did you shut the stove off? And you look over, oh yeah, broiler's still on. Click, shut it off. Safety, safety, safety. But I would love to see technology like that, or maybe the top 20 best picks consolidated on one page with links, so we can visualize what this technology looks like, right? You know, like just pick the 20 top, you know, Life 360, Google Home, Alexa, and whatever else. You know, we could almost set up a panel and pick the top 20 and put it on a website, maybe Alzheimer's Canada, right? And say, okay, as recommended by these people, these are our favorite picks, right? You know, and it could be updated as time goes on. It could be a living document as technology changes, but I would like to see that.
So I might challenge that, Roger. It's like saying, give the top 20 restaurants, Italian restaurants. I will have 50 of those. So that's, but to have a list, yeah, that's a big deal. And I think that's a challenge with the research community, that there's so much research happening that, you know, part of, again, I think we're bragging here about AgeWell. I'm biased to them as well because I'm connected to them, as Amel is, but that it was to reduce all these silos. Okay, so where are we going as well? You know, as we move forward in the, you know, a term that's used a lot, it's age tech. So some people might not have heard that term. Technology to help you age. It's a positive word, but it could be also misinterpreted. But so let's say all these age tech or age technologies, let's say age tools, okay, from the research side, Amel, I'm challenging all the researchers that we need to speed up the work sometimes, okay, especially in this space. It's not about simply, being perfect, okay? It's about, for caregivers and those living it, we need it yesterday, right? So I'm willing to try it out sooner than later. And that's why what's great of your work and the work that's happening of having the voices, okay, of, people living with dementia at the table, their caregivers, even the people that support us, okay, so personal support workers, occupational therapists, having them at the table, that's quite big now, this interdisciplinary, teams. So that's really what I'm kind of pushing forward to, is that within the research community, it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to fail fast with us at the table. Okay, we're going to tell you, okay, this is screwing up. Don't put the resources into this or quit this and move on. So that's my thoughts in the research space, that if you don't have us there, yeah, you just slow things down sometimes. So yeah.
I might want to challenge you, Ron, with a request that's super specific. Top 20 best guess from people we feel credible that would give meaningful input. It doesn't have to be perfect. But the problem I find, generally speaking, is we see the challenges and then we get lost in the conversation. I'm more of a low-hanging fruit kind of guy, and let's just move ahead and do it, yeah. Right? And something like that is very specific. You notice I said top 20, and
I'm all for it, Roger. I'm all for it. It's just technology keeps changing, so that's what people have to also
agree. And that's why I said treat it as a living document.
Okay.
That can be updated. This app is even better. So we're getting rid of this app and we're running with this now. It's more user-friendly, very clear, right? That kind of thing. But the problem with research, the problem with technology, when I talk to Joe Average living with dementia, they don't have a frigging clue what I'm talking about. They don't have a clue. Most of them don't even know what the Alzheimer Society is, let alone wonderful technology that they may be in a functional stage and take advantage of, right? So the reality is we need to plant seeds. We need them to click on that link and read up on it. Maybe they'll use it, right?
Thanks for those comments, everyone.
Enough said.
But hey, good. I love a good back and forth, right? But I think this does speak to the need, not just talking about getting people involved in research, but also there needs to be more attention paid to resources on getting people connected to technologies that can help them and keeping those up to date. That's just as Ron says, things always can get outdated. We always have to make sure to stay on top of things. So thanks for those feedback. I actually can take that back to the Alzheimer Society of Canada and talk about this. It's helpful. So next question, actually. So we talked a lot about the upsides and a bit about the downsides. Let's talk a bit more about the downsides of technology. We often think of computers, iPads. We talked about Google Home. We may even think of robotics when we think of how they can be used to provide care in the future. But what happens when these high-tech solutions fail? And to use a very recent and a very big example, about 2.5 weeks ago in early July, we saw the massive internet outage with Rogers that affected millions of people across Canada. And no doubt that some of those affected were people living with dementia and caregivers, healthcare providers, helping people living with dementia. So we often hear at the Alzheimer Society that accessibility, consistency, reliability are key for supporting people living with dementia. But when technology suddenly becomes inaccessible, inconsistent, unreliable, what can we do as a backup when situations like the Rogers outage happens? Because chances are something like that is going to happen in the future, smaller scale or even larger scale. What are some low-tech solutions, which Ron, you've already mentioned, that people living with dementia and caregivers can try when technology fails us? And whoever wants to go first, please go first.
So I don't mind going on that. So I love talking about backups there, Nathan, that as great as technology is, it's not perfect. Okay. And we also have to protect each other with technology as well, because as great as technology is to support people, there's also those bad people that are going to utilize technology to take advantage, okay, of our community. So we got to be careful of that. So simply put, some things we got to consider is privacy, okay, ethics. Now, not just privacy from my perspective as a caregiver, but I also need to get permission from Roger. Okay, if you're in that position to say, Roger, you know, I don't want to be followed, Ron. Okay, I don't want you to track me. Okay, so things like that have to be discussed. There's issues about cost as well. So technology could be expensive, and we got to realize, well, who are we giving the money to? You know, and there's a lot of, let's say, emotions in technology. So that trust piece. Okay, do we trust the technology? Are we confident in it? And is technology going to give us the confidence? And if it doesn't, what's our backup? So how many people are not confident with a specific, you know, company out there that might get disconnected and we can't call people, you know? So backups. So having backups is not just high tech, but sometimes you could have two high tech solutions. I could have two GPS devices on my dad. So if the battery fails on one, I have another one, you know, but there's an extra cost on that. Do I have my neighbor behind me? Okay, so if my dad leaves the house, can I call a neighbor? Okay, if I don't see him in the cameras and the GPS isn't working, do I have the coffee shop as well? Okay, so community is a huge play. So this is where dementia-friendly communities comes in as well. Okay, it's and our neighbors. So there's many ways to approach it, but the key word you said there, I'm just going to finish off, is backups. Okay, always have 2 or 3 backups to whatever you're coming up with. As I said, always have 3 solutions. What's the primary, and then what are the backups to this if I can afford it or get community involved.
Thanks, Ron. Anyone else?
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. You go ahead. Are you sure?
Yeah.
Question again, please. I had a thought there. I forgot the question.
Yeah, Roger. The question is, when technology fails us, just like with the Rogers outage, we don't have access to electricity, internet.
I got it.
Go ahead.
I mentioned earlier how low-tech options complement high-tech options, right? And I encourage anyone listening to this webinar is really check out that memory tips and tricks document. Every single option there is a low-tech option. And the reason I'm saying take a look at that is because often I combine low-tech with high-tech. Let me give you an example. Visual is the most, by far, effective memory trigger for me. I keep my medications on my kitchen counter. Why? Because I'm in and out of the kitchen 50 times a day. So you're looking at your medications, it's always prompting, you're getting that memory prompt. Or say I want to review a document. And I said, I'll read it this evening. Well, I'm a creature of habit. I watch the news every night. So I'm going to put that document on the kitchen or on the coffee table, because odds are when I want to review it, it's going to be on the coffee table and I'm going to look over and go, oh yeah, the document, right? There's a lot of low tech options that are just complement high tech. So I guess the answer I'd give, I wouldn't worry too much if I lost the connection, because I have such a robust low-tech techniques that I have learned over the year, memory techniques, tips and tricks, a well-placed item like the gym bag, lean it on the door. When you open the door, the gym bag falls over. And my favorite example is I want to do laundry. I take the laundry hamper, I plunk it right in the middle of the living room. And even if I'm procrastinating, I'm not going to forget because I'm tripping over that laundry hamper. The laundry will get done. Visual, right? You know, it's constantly triggering the memory. So I encourage you people to explore that too, but get a robust backup system. You know, I may miss some Google reminders. Crap happens, right? I may miss a meeting, you know, because I'm not getting the meeting prompt, but it's very short-lived. I can live with that. Anyway, enough said.
Thank you, Roger. And Amel.
Yeah, I was just going to add up when I heard about the low-tech solutions. Just to remember, when we talk about technology, we have to keep in mind, as we said in the beginning, that it's a tool and it doesn't replace the caregiver or the service or the intervention. So as an occupational therapist, for example, when you're in physical therapy, if you provide your patient with an orthosis, you have to make sure the person is able to work with or without the orthosis. And it's the same thing for the technology. It eases the life of the person, but it doesn't replace the function or the activity the person do. So this is something very important to keep in mind, because it's a concern of people that they are concerned, for example, that the technology will replace the human interaction or the service they used to receive. But technology is not to replace, but it's a tool to add up and add to the quality of life of the person.
Thank you all. Those were great answers. And by the way, Roger mentioned that memory tips and tricks resource. You can find it again at alzheimer.ca/memory-tips. There should be a link in the chat box as well for that. Seeing that we don't have that much time left, I'd like to go to the Q&A portion first. If anyone has any questions, please enter them now. We can probably still have time to answer 2 or 3. I do see one. Oh, this is a good, I actually like this. Dan McEwen says, thank you to all the speakers for an amazing webinar. Thank you to Alzheimer Society for hosting too. My only question is where Ron got that wonderful shirt.
All right. Yeah, no, this is actually at a marine aquarium conference many years ago, and I still reference it. By the way, Dory, which is over here, had dementia as well, for Nemo and Dory. And one day I'll do a presentation of how Nemo and Dory taught me technology and caregiving. I actually had cameras and sensors on the aquarium tank. So thanks, Dan, for that question.
We appreciate it, Dan. But yeah, Dory is actually a great representation of just living with cognitive impairment in the media. That's actually a positive representation, I would say. But that's a whole other topic.
Quick shout out to Keith Barrick in Ottawa. He actually put a Dory tattoo on his forearm, and Keith is publicly out there living with dementia. So just a shout out to Keith.
Yeah, I remember. Keith, if you're watching right now, we appreciate you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I want to give you guys just 1 minute each just to go with any final statements, thoughts that you want to share that maybe you didn't get to say yet. And then after that, we'll do the wrap up. So let's start with Amel. Do you have any final thoughts you want to share about this panel, about this discussion? Anything that's on your mind with 1 minute?
Yeah, maybe I had a lot of things to say, but if I can say one thing, I'm really aware of the challenge we have in the research field, that we need to go faster, and we need to privilege methods that are rigorous, but also that are suited to the reality, because we are not going to get there with classic RCTs and gold standards trials. We need to be close to the people, and I'm really aware of that. So I just wanted to thank Ron and Roger to make me more aware of that.
Thanks, Amel. Ron, let's go to you next.
Yeah. So first, I'm going to just say that I'm cheering for all of us. Okay, it doesn't matter what role you're in, who's watching. Many of you are caregivers, care partners, our friends living with dementia that are on board, Alzheimer's and Dementia Society, the occupational therapists, personal support workers, everybody. But we need supports through tools like technologies. Okay, we got 24 hours in a day. We only have so much dollars. We only have so much resources. We need to leverage technology. So to keep that in mind. And just one other tip for everyone else is also attach the emotion to the technology. Okay, so it's not just simply, I know we're talking about safety a lot for today's examples, to keep Roger safe, to find my dad, but it's what's that emotion that's attached to that adds to the quality of life. Does it allow my dad to have the joy to be out there instead of locking him up at home? Does it allow the caregiver to have that peace and confidence that I could go to sleep knowing that I'll get an alert if someone, silently exits? So keep that in mind. And it's all not about just the negative stuff, the challenges, but also the things that you want. Okay, never forget in your life of, I still want to travel maybe, or I want to do this. How could technology support you to get that there as well? Okay, so not just the challenges, but those things as well. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Ron. We really appreciate your thoughts here. Let's take it home with Roger. Your final thoughts.
Well, I'm thinking of this morning where Ron very patiently spent over half an hour with me trying to connect with the technology. It was giving me a hard time. On top of that, I'm not thinking clear. So that made Ron's challenges even more, right? So, we need support. We will ask questions more than once. How's that work again? That kind of thing. And the other comment I'm going to make is, even with all the best memory, low tech, high tech options, we're going to screw up. Plain and simple. It's not bulletproof, but it cuts way back on challenges if we were not to use it. If we're able to do so, it depends where we're at with our journey. And I know people think that all the time. So I want to clarify that a lot of what I brought up is more in a functional stages, even though I'm having challenges. So it's not a one size fits all bulletproof, but boy, does it assist my life. And I encourage you to look into it.
Thank you so much, Roger. Yes, every experience with dementia is unique. Every experience with dementia is different. But your feedback, from everyone here, really shows to people today how technology can help, the upsides, the downsides. This was a great discussion. I wish I had more time because I had a few more questions I couldn't get to. But again, I just want to reiterate, if for people who want to see the recording of this, it will be available hopefully later this week on the alzheimer.ca website. We'll also be sharing this through our social media platforms. And those social media platforms are in the chat box. Please follow us to get updated whenever we have news about the next webinar coming out. And yeah, you also visit the webpage on Dementia Talks Canada at alzheimer.ca/talks. That way you can also get alerted right away when the recording is ready, as well as news about the next webinar, which will be taking place at the beginning of September for World Alzheimer's Month. Very exciting. I wish I could tell you right now what we'll be talking about, but you'll have to wait just a bit longer to find out. And one more thing before we leave, a survey will be sent to you after this event. Please fill that out if you can. Your feedback does make this experience better for future Dementia Talks. As well, any feedback about the particular episode or series as a whole can be sent to research@alzheimer.ca. So there will be a slide that shows all this information on there, but I just want to again say thank you. Big thanks to all the panelists here, speakers here, Roger, Ron, Amel. You guys are amazing. I really appreciate you guys showing up and talking about what you've talked about. And I hope all the people who came here today on this recording, well, either right now or in the future, will appreciate what you've done here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon.
Great afternoon, everybody.